when you got people in the audience that are dancing and, you know, generally having a good time and probably have had a couple cocktails or whatever, they're a pretty good gauge. They'll tell you when you're doing well or not, you know, and if they're not telling, you know, it's not that cut and dry, but like you can watch these people and just watch them move and listen to the band and feel whether or not you've got them with you or you don't got them with you.
Hey everyone, it's Keith Billik here with another episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. Welcome back for all you regular listeners, and if this is your first time hearing the podcast, I'm really happy to have you with us. To all of you listeners, I hope you have a great holiday season. Hope you get some nice, relaxing time away from work or school or whatever other day-to-day activities you have. Get to relax, hopefully with maybe some family and friends. I hope you all find that pre-war Gibson flathead banjo under your tree, because I know you're all on Santa's nice list, right? Either way, hope everyone stays safe and has a lot of fun, and thank you for being a listener to the podcast. As always, I want to encourage you to get a hold of me if you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback about the podcast. I can be reached at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. I get emails from listeners all the time, either asking me about different banjo techniques or different banjo bridges, and I try to be as helpful as I can, so keep the emails coming, and I always enjoy hearing from you. If you enjoy listening to the Picky Fingers podcast, and I really hope you do, I urge you to consider supporting the podcast in one of any number of ways. The main way is to visit the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/banjopodcast. That's how you financially support the show and help me offset the cost of media hosting and production and equipment. I don't really get paid for doing this, so I do rely on listener contributions such as that. So please consider doing that if you enjoy the show. The other ways to support it are just spreading the word among social media. Feel free to share links to the episodes, tell your friends, tell the guests of the podcast that you heard them. If you're at a concert and you see a guest that you've heard on one of the episodes, make sure that they know that you're listening. That's a good way to tell them thanks for participating in the show, and it just encourages more and more people to want to do things like this. I do have an individual sponsor of today's show. It's a banjo player named Mike Jackson. I believe he's in the Washington, D.C. area, and Mike contacted me with basically two requests. His first request was he wanted to sponsor an episode of the podcast, which of course I'm always delighted to hear that people are willing to do that. And his second request, which was totally separate, or so he thought, was he recommended that I track down a banjo player named Kyle Tuttle to interview for a future episode. So I was really happy to be able to tell Mike that Kyle actually was one of the next episodes that was coming up. And if he'd like to sponsor an episode, that would seem like the perfect one to do it. So here you have it, Mike Jackson supporting the episode that features Kyle Tuttle. Now, not only am I thankful to Mike for being willing to sponsor the episode, I'm actually thankful that this episode happened at all. And the reason is I had arranged with Kyle a specific evening that he was going to be playing in town, and I was going to meet up with him and sit down for the interview. Pretty routine at that point. However, I got a call late afternoon that my son had apparently got a tooth knocked out at school that day. So the time that I thought I was going to spend packing up my recording gear and making my way over and talking to Kyle, it was actually spent driving all around town for emergency dental visits and things like that. So needless to say, I ended up in a hurry and kind of stressed out and flustered, but Kyle was very accommodating, and he was willing to accommodate whatever my hectic last minute schedule needed to be. So thanks, Kyle, for dealing with that. I hope I wasn't too much of a stressed out mess when I showed up. Also, thanks, the venue that Kyle was playing that evening is a room called the Parliament Room, and that's part of a restaurant called the Otis Supply. And they really made a good accommodation for us. They found a nice, relatively quiet spot in the corner of their restaurant for me to do the interview. So therefore, as part of the interview, you're going to be able to hear some restaurant noises in the background. And fortunately, I don't even think we scared off any people, as funny as that might have been to see two banjo players sitting in the corner with microphones and everything. But so you'll hear some restaurant noises in the background, but don't worry, all of Kyle's wisdom and most importantly his banjo playing comes through loud and clear. So what to say about Kyle and his playing? He's one of the most in-demand players out there right now. Anybody who follows him at all, either on social media or just pays attention to what he's been up to, knows that he's constantly on tour. A lot of times it's with the Jeff Austin band, but he's always sitting in with different bands around Nashville or going on mini tours with other bands as a fill-in. And it's really not surprising because he's a fantastic player. So any band that is able to have him either sit in for a show or for recordings or whatever, it's going to sound better because of it. So I think he has a really exciting style. I really enjoyed hearing him. I enjoyed talking to him about what kind of things go into that style. So I encourage all of you to check out his playing whenever you can and enjoy this interview with Kyle Tuttle. All right, so Kyle, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Keith.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks
very
much for
making the
having
time
me.
and everything.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Start by telling me where you came from and how you started with the banjo.
I came from Georgia, North Georgia. I grew up there, and I was a guitar player as a kid, as a little one. I got turned on to my grandparents sang just in church and to me as a kid, as people do to children or whatever, and
folk songs,
yeah, totally, folk songs and hymns, Southern Baptist hymn stuff, on top of Old Smoky and Red River Valley and stuff like that, And I, about 2.5 years old, picked up this little toy guitar that they had and started banging around on it and just strumming at it and singing the songs, And so they put me in guitar lessons pretty much as soon as they could. I think 5 years old was when I had my first guitar lesson, with like a nylon string, 3/4 or half size or whatever.
So whatever was the easiest for 5-year-old Kyle to get his hands on.
Exactly.
Right.
And man, I was a guitar player through about 10th grade, and I was a rock and roller, man. I got into electric guitar, and I had a band with my buddies. We played our 8th grade dance, we were playing like Leonard Skinner and stuff like that, being
rock
from
kind
Georgia.
of stuff?
Classic rock, and a little bit of Metallica, and sprinkled in some. I was a big Ozzy fan, for sure. And I was kind of a shredder guitar player, and then I discovered the Grateful Dead and bluegrass music, and that was it, for me. And
how did you discover that? Did somebody introduce it to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been around it, I'd been around banjos and that music and bluegrass music just being from the South, and it wasn't really, it just didn't spark my interest, I liked heavy, distorted electric sounds and drums and angsty stuff, and I was playing at a coffee shop in my hometown in Cumming, Georgia, and a dude was going. I had played, I don't remember what, a couple songs by myself on like a Wednesday evening on an acoustic guitar, and a dude after me was like, "Hey, I'm going to get up and play some bluegrass songs. You think you'd want to play some lead with me on these songs?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot." And I was a competent enough guitar player to improvise at that point and know what key we were in and how to navigate that with a stranger, A lot
of that Grateful Dead stuff can get a little twangy and
in my shred metal stuff, my guitar instructor at the time had taught me like modes and theory and enough of that stuff that I could do a poor job, I'll say, of improvising on a bluegrass song, You
might not have gotten the style right, but you weren't playing
wrong
bad
notes. Exactly. Stylistically, I had no clue what I was doing. Harmonically, I knew how to follow the rules and not play something that sounded too terribly bad. And this guy, I guess, could tell that. And so he's like, "Hey, man, why don't you hop up and play a couple songs with me?" And I did, and that was that. I mean, I was pretty hooked on. I was like, "Wow, this is really fun to play folk music with another person, folk style music or whatever."
Cool.
And very shortly after that, my grandparents had a banjo that nobody in the family played, and they gifted it to me for my 17th birthday.
Without you ever having expressed too much interest. They just said, Kyle likes his guitar, maybe he'll like this too?
Exactly. Okay. And I was listening to at that point, I'd started playing bluegrass songs and flat picking a little bit, on my guitar. So they're like, oh, well, we've got this banjo laying around. Let's just give him this banjo.
Yeah.
And they did, and it was an old Silvertone plastic resonator, actual hide head, still from the 60s, still a piece of real skin, a plastic resonator with a bolt through the back, through the middle into
just a single flathead screw.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
And it was enough for me to, and some little old, country homemade book that wasn't a Mel Bay book or anything you'd recognize. I have no idea what it was called, with little hand-drawn diagrams on how to do the stuff. And the first time I went, I was just like, woo, that's it, man. I'm done, I'm cooked. So that was from there on, I just went for it, trying to play banjo.
After you sat in with the guy at the open mic night, what kind of bluegrass stuff were you listening to? Did you discover any groups in particular that you were taken to?
There was a few things. There was I can't remember the exact order, but I had already heard the Old and in the Way stuff, and there's the Jerry connection there. Of course, Jerry's playing banjo, and then you got all the other dudes that are really bluegrass cats that are on that record, so I was delving into that. And then I was given the Del McCoury Band album with Steve Earle,
Yeah.
where it's like basically Del's band doing Steve Earle's songs for the most part, which again was really cool for me because Steve Earle's a rocker, and those songs lean a little more compositionally towards some rock and roll songs, but they're being played by the Del McCoury Band. So here you got this excellent example of musicianship, but again, being the song choices kind of crossed into two worlds that I was interested, or that appealed to me, and it made it more palatable.
Hard wind come and blew his dreams away. So he headed on the west coast, thought he could not lose. Then rolling down the highway with the Dust Bowl blues.
Totally. So I sat there and tried to learn all the Rob parts, to that record, and then years later listened again and realized I didn't know how badly I was doing at it at the time. But
sometimes not knowing how difficult it's supposed to be actually helps you.
Oh, absolutely.
You become more of a fearless
absolutely,
student.
Man.
That's
and
cool.
as a kid, as a young person, I think a lot of young people in music probably experience that. You don't know how tough what you're trying to do is, and you're just so inspired and excited that you just work really hard.
Right.
And then later you're like, wow, how did I do that? How did I figure that out, man?
Or why did I even try in the first
place? Or why did I even try? Yeah,
stupid.
Exactly.
Become old and jaded and all that.
Exactly.
Kind of.
But it's too late by then, man.
So were you trying to hold down a more or less traditional style, or was all of your heavy metal and rock influencing the way you played too? Like, did you start doing a lot of, I don't know, single string, for example, because that would have been a more guitar-y approach?
I kind of always had a more guitar-ish approach, and I was sitting and learning by ear as close as I could to Flatt and Scruggs tapes, as well as that Del McCoury Band record, and then some other more trad Del records that I got into from there. But I never hit the Earl Scruggs book, which I regret. I don't know why I didn't get farther into that sooner in my, I knew it existed. I even had it, and I learned a few little things out of it, but I didn't dig in like I should have on that stuff for a few years, because I was also excited by Bela and, it's and all of the hip, exciting sounds, and so I enjoyed bluegrass banjo, but I had too many influences going on and was playing in a way that worked for me and involved my version of that stuff for a few years until I really came around and then hunkered down and got into.
You felt like you revisited later in time a bit more of a traditional approach?
Totally. And got it much better the second time around,
Nice. Do you think that, I don't know, if you had to do it over again, do you think that helped you in some way, keep an open mind, or it just is what it is? Probably?
I think it just is what it is, man. It's so hard to say. I mean, sometimes I sit here and say, I wish I had taken myself to task on the real trad stuff and the rudiments of fundamentally playing the banjo sooner. But if I had, I wouldn't be the same that I am today, for better or worse. And
Right.
Who's to say, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting that you came to it a little backwards, because when I hear someone like you play, you're more or less a modern player. You utilize a lot of the melodics and the single strings as well as the scrugs. But compared to maybe some of our other modern guys like a Bela or a Wes or a Gnome, where they have more of like a smoother, mellow, even sound, I hear you as being a little more influenced by like a twangier, edgy, bluegrassy approach.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or what do you think gave you that?
I would. I mean, man, I love bluegrass music, you know, I mean, to a high degree, and I spent a little while trying to be like, I can sound like Bela. I want to sound just like Bela, you know. And then I moved to Boston, and then I discovered Wes and became buddies with him. And then I was like, well, now I want to sound like Wes, man.
Yeah.
You know, I've worked really hard, not to sound just like him, but you know. And then there was a point where I was like, that's just not me. I don't sound like either of those guys. And also, I think it's worth noting, not that it's like exclusive or regional or whatever, but like all of those other three dudes are not from the South. And I am, and I grew up there being around it all, you know, and I think there's, I really think that there's something to be said musically and culturally for how different places that you live affect the way you might sound, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's true in historically that's been true in several American musics, jazz specifically, and the blues, having, you know, one area of blues is so different than another area of blues. And I feel like that's just speaks a little bit to where I'm from, I think, you know.
It's pretty common to talk about regional fiddle and banjo styles when you're only talking about that. I don't know why it wouldn't also apply to broader genre approach. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you moved to Boston and you decided that you're developing your own style, maybe inspired by Wes, but what kind of things helped you develop that?
Boston was interesting for me too, because like I moved to Boston to go to school, to go to Berklee College of Music. Mm-hmm. And I was the fifth banjo player in the program there. So they still were very much figuring it out. And the other cats that were there were mostly interested in developing their bluegrass stuff, playing banjo music. I was like kind of alone in that I was like really trying to learn how to play other musics, not bluegrass music. You know, I mean, I really wanted to understand harmony and how to improvise in a jazz format at a high level.
Were they able to accommodate that?
Yes.
For a banjo player?
Yes, but I had to do the legwork to make it happen. So, like, basically, without getting too into it, you actually sign up on a computer, and the banjo's in the string department. So when you sign up for a class, the string department instrument is allowed to take string department classes. That's just how the interface on the computer works, you know. And I wanted to study with piano players and horn players and take classes that were not in the string department. Yeah. And so, like, I actually had to go to people's office hours, professors' office hours, find the classes I knew I wanted to take, go sit down, knock on someone's door and say, hey, I play the banjo, but I'm interested in taking this class.
And watch the look on their face.
Yeah, and amazingly, man, it was always like a surprise, no doubt, and then like enthusiasm. Like, people are stoked. You know, especially another cool thing is when I went to school, I was 23 years old. So I'd been living on my own, and I'd been in a touring band. And I was surrounded by 18-year-old kids who were just learning to be away from mommy and daddy for the first time. And so that's a headache, you know, for teachers. Just, I mean, on a basic level, to be around people that age, we all know is a headache, man. And so, it was also really fortunate for me that I was a little bit older, and when I could go to instructors and express that I was interested in taking this class that my instrument wasn't set up for, and was willing to work hard enough that I would hold my own and do the thing. Everyone was always super stoked about it. So mostly I was sitting in classrooms with horn players and guitar players, jazz guitar players, you know, and piano players, and doing a lot of transcribing, a lot of ear training, and a lot of classes where you didn't even have an instrument, you know, just sitting there doing harmony workbooks and exercises and listening and composition and stuff like that.
Do you feel like you still use a lot of the knowledge that you got there?
Yeah, it's always coming back, like I'm understanding it better. Like I understand it better today than I did yesterday, and I'll understand it better tomorrow. And there's a waiting time almost, when you're cramming that much stuff in your brain, it takes a long time to process it and for it to all sort of come out. And so you said, I'm really long-winded on this stuff, but you said something about my own sound and my own approach during the Boston time, and I feel like I wasn't even close to having that at that time. Like, I feel like I was very much still figuring out what I was doing, and in a lot of those class situations, I understood what was going on, but I couldn't regurgitate it on the banjo as fast as a piano player could, because the pedagogy for the stuff we're working on is on the piano. So the piano guy sits there and says, and then all the piano players in the room and the guitar players hit it back immediately, and I'm over here like, I need to go out in the hall for 15 minutes and work on how it works on a banjo, and then come back in here and I'll be able to play this stuff.
That still happens to me all the time if I learn a fiddle tune from my mandolin playing buddy. Yeah. The first half is learning the notes, and then the second half is learning, you could play those same notes a million different ways. Which way is going to work for me?
Exactly. And be musical.
Figure out your arrangement of it.
At least, So, I was very much in school during that time. You know what I mean? And I think you have to go through a period when you're learning things, you sound bad. You have to be willing to get out and fall on your face and not always sound great doing them, And my goal, also, it's worth stating that my goal wasn't and isn't to be regarded as a jazz banjo guy. That's a level of understanding about music that I recognize in that world, and that's sort of the place in American music that gets you the densest harmony and an opportunity to improvise over it. And if you can hang even to some degree in that world and with that understanding of music theory, there's really not a whole lot you can't do and wrap your head around. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? Or at least that was my perspective.
It's somewhat of a pinnacle of music fundamentals. And like you said, if you can handle that, there's nothing about bluegrass that's going to confuse you.
Sure, totally.
There are stylistic things that you'll have to pick up on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you couldn't I think going to school to learn to study bluegrass, if that's what you want to do, great, go for it. I think there's a lot of avenues to study that don't involve school, and I'm sure the same could be said for jazz, but for me, being a banjo player at that time in my life, it made the most sense to take that academic route.
So, not to put you on the spot too much, but what would you say is something that you learned there, maybe in one of the jazz classes, that if you were to explain it could maybe help everyone, something to work on? Are there any concepts around the modes or something that you feel like really helped your progress, or was a light bulb moment?
Man, I mean, I want to say ear training. I want to say training that gaining the ability to recognize sounds, and be able to say, here we are in G major. Immediately recognize the sound that's a major 7 chord, and it doesn't sound the same as this, which is a 6 chord. And if you're going to have, I just went up a minor third and played another major 7 chord, and being able to pick those sounds out without having to search for them, I think was huge for me. And that starts with solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And being able to sing those things back and recognize intervals and stuff,
You think that's pretty important, being able to vocalize a lot of the things that you're playing? Did that help you quite a bit?
It helps me personally to understand it and to communicate with people about it, for sure. Ultimately it's all sounds, and music theory is just a lot of words to talk about, a lot of words to quantify sounds.
Yeah. Exactly. So since then, what projects have you been involved in? I know that I've heard you on do you only have the one solo album? Is it called Bobcat?
It is, yeah. Okay. I have that album out, and I'm working on a second one right now.
Oh, wonderful. Mm-hmm. What other groups have you played with recently?
I've been working with the Jeff Austin Band right now for coming up on 2 years. The end of this year will be 2 years. which is just a full-time road band.
Yeah.
There's no recording out on that band, but we're actually in the studio working on one right now. Before that, I was playing in Jenny Lynn Gardner's band, and we made a record on that project, which I'm super proud of. It was a lot of fun. And before that, I was in a band called Fraser Band with a guy named John Fraser, based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and we made a record. That band was actually really influential for me and a lot of fun because it's like a fusion band. It's like a
The Fraser Band is?
Yeah, Fraser Band. It's like an electric, rock bluegrass fusion band or whatever, kind of a party band.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun, and I got to play electric banjo in it a lot of the time, which was like really, really great for me. I love it.
Do you feel like the Bobcat album, is that probably the best representation of your playing that's available out there? Or
yeah, I guess, man. Of course, it's one of those things. Like that record's 3 years old now, and I listen to it, and I'm just like, oh, geez. I feel like I could make that record so much better today, but I think everyone feels that way about things. But I'm still super proud of it. I shouldn't say it. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm very proud of it.
Right. So what's this banjo that you have here?
Man, this is the pot is a 1979 Ode. I think style C is what they called them. It's a walnut. It's like all walnut, maybe mahogany rim. I can't remember. It's a walnut resonator. I know that. The neck was made by Robin Smith. It's a maple neck.
Is that radiused? I can't.
It
quite,
is.
Okay,
Yeah, it's pretty.
Like it.
It's pretty heavy radius, and it's also pretty fat.
Yeah.
Pretty wide. I think it's a graduated radius. I can't remember what the dimensions on that are, but it's pretty curved as far as curves go, and it's wide and jumbo frets too.
So more guitar-y.
More, yeah.
Kind of a throwback to your
exactly,
to your guitar
man.
days.
It's almost with the light string gauge of a banjo and jumbo frets. It's almost like a scalloped neck, because like you can't with those old the old Gibson frets from the 60s and stuff, they're so thin and flat that when you touch a note, you probably can touch the neck. But with this thing, there's no way. I mean, if I was to touch the neck,
you're already out of
I'm
tune.
like bending my note out of tune, So basically, I'm touching frets and no wood, which I feel like gives you a good. It's easy to move relatively fast and get a good clean note without having to work super hard for it.
Yeah, which is why the guitarists who use those scalped frets, they're the shredder speed metal guys, and
exactly.
It allows for a little more of that.
All that fun stuff. Yeah, I spent my days sweet picking for a little while there.
Did you? That's cool. It reminds me of I think it says a lot about. Or it allows us to understand a lot about Billy Strings, that was his background too.
Oh, sure.
He was
totally.
a metal kid, and once you know that about him,
it makes sense.
It just explains everything about him.
Totally.
So you were starting to give me the spiel about your strings, and I told you to hold it for this. Well, tell me again what the strings are and why you enjoy using those.
Yeah, so these are they're made by the American-made Banjo Company, which I think is just like AmericanMadeBanjoCompany.com or something. I can't remember what the website is, but they they will let you custom order the string gauges, which is really nice, and they're cryogenically frozen. Mm-hmm. So I guess what Tom Marisola, who runs the company, was telling me is that somehow cryogenically freezing a metal fundamentally changes its composition in a way that allows it to not rust as fast. I don't really understand, man, but
you think it's not just marketing. You've actually experienced, and you think they last a little longer.
To me, they feel better, and they don't rust as fast, and they sound good longer. I mean, I sound like a commercial, but that's really real.
Great.
That's really what I think about them.
So what gauges did you decide on then, if you can customize it like that?
I've been using for a pretty long time now 11, 13, 20, 10.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to say it's a Bill Keith set he used to use, same.
It's close. Yeah,
Okay.
Bill did 11, I think 13 and 20, I'm not sure, and 11 on the top,
And what did you say yours was, 10?
10,
Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
So,
and why is that? Did you...
honestly, it's because I can't get an 11 underneath my railroad spikes up there, man. I did it one time, and it was like, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't sound good. But Bill's thing was that it was... he picked those gauges because they balanced the weight over the bridge in some even way. You know, Bill was very into math,
reasons,
man. Yeah, totally. But also, interestingly enough, Terry Balcom plays 11, something else. I can't remember. This isn't the rest of the Balcom set. And his thing about it, which I think, as much as I'm sure Bill's right about the math part, Terry's thing is that when you're doing all that Scruggs stuff, you know, you're playing, even though those strings are different pitches, they're having them be the same size in a way. They're only a minor third apart, so the tension's not that it's not really that different. And Terry says that he likes the way they sound, the way that backup stuff sounds with two strings of the same size up there, because I guess that is a thinner B string than you would normally have. You know,
Sure,
like if you had an 11 on the D, you'd probably have a 12 or 13
at least
on the B, and I've got a 13 on the G. You know, and a 20 on the D, which is also real light. So basically, I've got like heavy end, like heavies outsides and lightweight insides, which I don't know. It works for me. I like it.
Yeah,
you know?
groovy.
Yeah.
What about the rest of this stuff? We have some banjo nerd listeners, and they're going to want to know what bridge you have and the head.
Yeah.
And any other tricks that you're up to.
Man, it's pretty trick free. Honestly, it's and I don't like to. I'm not one of those people that's constantly making adjustments and stuff. You know, I mean, if I can get it where I'm happy with it, it's going to stay there. So this is the bridge is made by Robin Smith also, because he made the neck, you know, and he radiused the bridge he did the whole setup or whatever.
Yeah.
It's compensated on the third string, you know, barely. That I had to take it back and get him to make a little adjustment on that, you know. It's just like a Presto tailpiece that's pretty low, not all the way down, but pretty low, with like no angle down, if you know what that means. I don't really know how you say that. The screw that you put in the back that would drive the front end down.
It's parallel to the head,
exactly.
But the whole thing is close to the head. So yeah,
it's not quite parallel to the head. It's like a little bit leaning up towards the bridge.
Got it.
It's the head. The actual head on this thing is a American-made banjo head, which is a Remo head. They get them sprayed with their logo.
It's a little thicker, too?
It's a little thicker frosting on there, which honestly I don't love, but it's been on this banjo for a really long time, and it sounds good on here. You know, I've got a few other instruments, and this is the only one that has one of these heads on it. And at the time that I put it on, this was not my main axe, and this was the head I had. So I was just kind of like, I'm going to put it together with that.
Who cares? Try that.
You know, and then as it turns out, this one's been on here for years. As you can see,
you've worn.
I'm pretty worn.
No matter how much frosting they put on there at one time, it's not
gone,
there anymore.
It's gone now. Yeah, it's probably time for a new head. But I'm one of the. It's like I'm happy with the way it sounds today. I don't really see the need to take that thing off.
Don't mess with it.
And whatever, you know. So, but when I do get a new head, I'm going to go with one of the Remo standard
Just
frosting
standard
level
deals.
ones. Yeah. These ones do feel a little weird when they're fresh.
Yeah,
you
I
can
actually
tell.
like that. Like once mine gets to where Kyle has a worn off spot where it's clear, you know, where his fingers rub, and even though that's not damaging the head, it's still fine. I always find that I use the tack of the frosting to keep my fingers planted, so it kind of annoys me when it gets all worn off, and I usually change them because of that.
Yeah, because you don't have any grip.
Yeah, like to cling
That makes
onto
sense.
it.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean,
So you're playing live a lot. What's your live setup? Do you have a pickup or a certain microphone that you use?
my general setup is, and this is because I'm playing in basically a party band. The Jeff Austin Band is a party band, and it is a very loud show. Okay. And the crowds are loud. And so I got a towel stuffed in the banjo because there's really no other way around it, unfortunately. And in that project and with a few other projects here lately, I've been using some effects, some electric guitar effects, which takes it back to the I've always been a gearhead, man. I mean, I was an electric guitar player as a kid, and so I've always loved amps and sound effects and toys and stuff like that. And so I've kind of always been doing that stuff on the banjo, but I used to have a very cheap rig that didn't really do it well, and I've actually got it pretty dialed into where I can do that stuff now and control it,
So this is interesting. You use a lot of effects on the acoustic banjo?
Yeah.
Which ones do you find work the best?
Well,
because it's pretty tough to...
It's pretty tough, man. There's a few things. I mean, delays, there's delays. We have a lot of stuff with the Jeff Austin Band where we're playing big, long, open solos, and there's times where I can improvise for as long as I want, and it's generally expected that I'm going to play for 2 minutes, or sometimes close to a 3-minute banjo solo. And that's a Flat and Scruggs song, man. I mean, those songs are 2 minutes and 40 seconds long, so right. It's like to improvise a banjo solo for that amount of time and not have it suck or be boring or be over too soon, get to the high point sooner than you want it to or whatever. Because once you do, once you do that, you've kind of done it. Some people can do it multiple times in one ride on a tune, but it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's hard to maintain the interest and the energy.
Yeah, and so there's a tune that's got, it just starts basically, it's an E minor. My solo is an E minor vamp,
Okay.
And so you got like a. So if I'm going to start improvising on that, 1, 2, 3. Imagine that break, but with a delay pedal. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much more. You got...
Leave a lot of space. You don't need a delay pedal.
Yeah,
you just play.
It's easier when there's a toy that'll do it for you.
Yeah.
But so I use a delay. I use an envelope like the Jerry Garcia sound.
Yeah.
I have an octave. It's your note, an octave down, and an octave up. And
the
pog.
Okay.
Yeah. And I generally dial my note out of it. So you got so like for example, you can't. There's only one note you can simulate it with on the banjo. But rather than hearing this.
Yeah.
I play this, and you hear this.
Yeah.
And so turn that into whole lines. It's a wild sound, and you can't use it for a whole solo. You can't use it for these things are real sparingly. There's one tune with Jeff where I'll or in other situations too where I'll almost treat the pog like it's a second instrument, right? And so like I might play a phrase. I'll call and response with myself.
I see where you're going. Yeah,
one of them being
really
me,
cool.
and one of them being the octave sound. You know what I mean? And you just back and forth like that. I've got a fuzz that this guy Noise Kick FX is the name of the company. He's built a couple pedals for me, and he's good with stuff that's for acoustic instruments. And I've got a fuzz that has a blend on it. So basically,
dry blend.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. So I can choose how much of the fuzz. It's not. Yes, I'm turning on a fuzz pedal, but you're probably still hearing 60% of my clean sound and 40% of this fuzz sound, which allows me to control. When you just put a fuzz pedal on a banjo and you start, it's just like
it's just a mess. Yeah,
you just wash.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was surprised to hear that you're using effects on the acoustic because it is hard to find ones that work right.
Yeah. So and then like the delay. Also with that delay, for example, my buddy Matt at Noise Kick built the delay for me, but it's modeled after a Black Tiger delay made by I can't remember who. But what it has is a button. How do you say that? It's a button that that cuts off the send to the effect, but leaves the return. So like
the trails.
Leaves the trails,
yeah.
exactly. So because with an acoustic instrument, when you turn on an effect and then turn off an effect, it's so A and B, and they're so far apart. So like being able to like play a phrase, I might play some big ascending phrase. And then once I get up there, I can go with the trails of that ascending thing going nuts,
cool.
But I'll shut it off, and now my
so that stays nice and
is
clear,
a fresh,
but
clear sound, but still in my signal, you've got this wild sound happening rather than just shutting it off and having it go away. So those are ways to make the effect thing play into an acoustic sound and not send the listener, hopefully, too terribly far away from what they're hearing,
Right, and also it gives you a way of crafting a 2-minute solo so that you don't feel like...
it's not just me. I mean, it is just me and some boxes, but I'm controlling the boxes, and they're helping me to do that whole thing,
So let's say you have a 2-minute E minor vamp. It sounds like your approach is just start off real simple, maybe almost like a Miles Davis-y thing where you're just stabbing a few notes, outlining a basic funky melody or something.
Yeah, letting the band come down. You know what I mean? It's you can almost direct the band down at the beginning of something like that just by how sparsely you play, and then building. I mean, you also have to have a band that knows how to do this. I mean, one guy can't. I couldn't hop in and do it with a bass player that didn't understand how that worked and make it work. Or if I did, I'd be lucky. There's
it's just about listening, right? They have to.
Yeah, it's about listening and going with you, tension and release. I mean, basically, what you need to do is start low, build some tension, release it around lower. Release it once in the lower level still, then like build it again and release it again in the middle level. And when you got people in the audience that are dancing and generally having a good time and probably have had a couple cocktails or whatever, they're a pretty good gauge. They'll tell you when you're doing well or not, and if they're not telling, it's not that cut and dry, but like you can watch these people and just watch them move and listen to the band and feel whether or not you've got them with you or you don't got them with you, and you need to stay down low a little bit more and use some more, get their attention, man, if that's what you have to do, and then get their attention with some of that, and then get them back into just just comfortable tension back and forth until you really, eventually you're just up there, and people are screaming, and that's when you're like, all right, cool. Exactly. Yeah, and everyone knows what to do, so.
What are some other ways to build that tension? You just illustrated some, like using dissonant intervals and whatnot. Do you have any other specific devices, or is it mostly about rhythm and groove and volume, maybe even?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of rhythm and groove and volume. I find that space, leaving space is such a... First of all, it's not intuitive to banjo players. I mean, we naturally just want to... And it's not... So it's not intuitive to leave space out like that, But learning how to play little phrases, call and responsing with yourself, even if it's doesn't involve an effect, but something, playing something low, playing it high up, That's like little stuff like that gets people's attention in a way that will get them on board with what you're doing, and then they'll go with, it's a very, I feel like those long solos are very interactive, you got to get a crowd, you got to make sure the band is with you and knows what you're doing and knows how to build and knows your cues for when you're done and when you're not, and you got to be able to scoop the crowd with you and get them to go with you, I don't really know if there's many more examples of things.
Do you have any tips for when you're backing up somebody else doing that?
Yeah,
Are there backup
totally,
techniques that you
man.
use?
I mean, you start with just wide open, and then like once somebody's going a little bit more, once they've got some drive to what they're doing, and then building, just building voicings. You know what I mean? Like that, just a nice up and down with, that was just basically fourth voice, like, harmonic ambiguity. Nothing that I'm really doing there is going to get in the way of what a soloist is doing, So
By
you don't.
fourths voicing, do you mean more or less a power chord kind of voicing?
No,
Or explain a little more what you're actually doing there.
Yeah, so like starting on an E, second fret on the fourth string, an E going up a fourth would be an A, second fret on the third string, go up a fourth, you'd have a D on the B string, third fret, and then another fourth, you got a G on the first string. So it's not technically a chord because there's no thirds. You know what I mean? So this is a stack of fourths, basically.
Yeah.
Which I said it's harmonically ambiguous, meaning like this could be an E minor chord, this could be an A7 sus chord, this could be a D sus chord, this could be a number of things, Yeah. And I'm moving it up diatonically for the most part.
Within E minor?
Within E minor, yeah. So like you can take the whole shape up a whole step. And then like when I moved up to here, this technically isn't fourths anymore, but it's really close. I'm going A on the fourth string, D above that, G above that, and then fourths would be with that C, but like over the E minor thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the B
Keep
on
it a
top
B.
rather than that, but
Yeah, that's interesting.
or stuff like that.
It's another tension note that you can...
tension and release within a rhythm part, within the harmony and the rhythm, and then when somebody gets way high, especially fiddles, when a fiddle gets into a pattern, a bowing pattern that a lot of times are similar to roll patterns, and you can hear that kind of thing. You can like play a pattern similar kind of mimicking underneath what someone else is doing, and all that stuff is just things you learn from years of jamming with your buddies, and then ultimately in situations that are a little bit beyond bluegrass situations, and then ultimately getting in front of a crowd of people where you're like, all right, I need tools, I need more sounds, what do I do?
And fortunately, the Jeff Austin type of crowd, they're very, I don't want to say forgiving because they're still music fans, but they enjoy seeing you take those chances.
Yeah, totally, man.
Even if you don't 100% of the time execute them perfectly.
Totally.
They love that you're trying and they're on the ride.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm okay with it. I mean, man, I wish I was perfect. I wish that every time I painted myself into a corner, I got out. And so a lot of times I do, and I'm getting better and better at it, but I don't always. And I'm in my wise old age, I can say I'm okay with that.
Yeah, good. You're at a point of peace.
Yeah,
and self-reflection.
Yeah.
You never actually mentioned what the pickup was that you use with all the effects.
Oh,
I feel like
gotcha.
that's important too,
It is. Yeah, okay. So the Fishman Rare Earth banjo pickup is the one that's in there. It's just basically right under the bridge with a piece of tape holding the little metal transducer. I got it pretty much right under the bridge and pretty much as close as I can get the receiver or whatever, you want to call the black block that's in there, as close as I can get it to that little chip of metal that's taped under there. And then there's a towel in it. Not stuffed tight, but pretty much taking up all the space.
Trying to clog it up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then I'm using the Felix, the Grace Designs Felix.
Yeah.
And in that scenario, I'm actually only using one channel. You know, I just have the pickup, so I'm only technically using half of that piece of gear for that show. But I love that thing, man. That's the best. It's the best piece.
They're very cool.
It's the best. It makes me sound the best of anything that I've ever used, and I'm
Do you
super
add a
happy with
mic for more acoustic oriented?
So I don't in the Jeff Austin band, and I don't. So I have a little electric band that I play with called Tire Fire. It's like my little project, you know, my party band or whatever.
You play electric banjo?
I play electric banjo and acoustic banjo plugged in through the same board. Yeah, so I have an electric instrument that's really cool, but that's a different thing. I also use the acoustic banjo sometimes. Then it's the same deal, stuffed with a towel. I mean, we're playing with drums, and it's loud, you know. And at that point, I'm actually even running the acoustic banjo through the Felix and then into a Fender tube amp. So you know, that's that sound. But with these guys, I'm out on the road right now with Town Mountain, filling in while Jesse's at home on daddy duty. And
congrats, Jesse.
Congrats, Jesse, man. Thanks for letting me hang with your boys for a minute here. And I'm having a blast, man. I mean, this is so much fun. I can't even describe
I'm looking forward to seeing
I've been really good friends with these guys for a long time, so it's a special treat to get to hop in. You know, it's not just a sub gig for me because they're my buddies, you know. But as far as the gear on this one, man, because these guys are a bluegrass band, I am using. I don't have a towel. Woohoo! No towel in the banjo, and
it's back to life.
And
that's what we call the banjo mating call, right there.
No towel, and I'm using the Audio-Technica Pro 35 clip-on mic. I'm not actually blending it myself. I'm sending two lines to the front of house. So because they have a guy, Nick Jones, who's
pickup and
excellent
mic.
Yeah. So I'm sending the Fishman Rare Earth and the Audio-Technica Pro 35 both into my Felix, and then that thing can operate as I could either blend those two and send one line to the house, or I could just treat it as two. Basically, it's two DIs in one box.
And that's what you do.
That's what I'm doing because they have a guy who's really good, and there's no need for me to decide what the blend should sound like. Unfortunately, I can blend it in my ears, so I hear what I want, you hear what he wants. Everybody's happy.
He's good at what he does.
Yeah, and he's very good, and yeah, I'm loving it. It's actually the best live sound that I've ever had personally in a onstage situation.
Oh, that's amazing.
You know, for multiple nights in a row. I mean, obviously, I've been in great scenarios, but I've never been in a situation quite like this for this many days in a row where it's just like, cool. Every time I turn this on, it sounds the same, and it's really good, man.
What a difference, right?
Yeah, it's really nice.
Who would have ever guessed that a big part of enjoying your music playing experience might be getting to hear good tones?
I know. Imagine that. Yeah, exactly. Who'd have thunk it?
What a concept.
But, there we are. Yeah.
So if people want to track down your playing or follow you or whatever, how do they find you on, the internet?
Yeah, man, KyleTuttle.com. That's it. I have, there's that album. My album Bobcat is a couple years old now, and it's out of everywhere that music is out, and you can order a copy from me on my website. Actually, the only place to buy a physical copy is from me, but you can download it at all of the download places. Yeah. And, I have this little project I'm working on right now that's like a half electric, half acoustic kind of A-side, B-side thing that will be
Is that the band that
available
you just mentioned with the
so
twin amp?
Basically it's like the A side of it, or whichever side ends up. The acoustic side is like similar to the Bobcat album that I made. It's a 5-piece bluegrass band. And the B side, or the other side or whatever, is like introducing, hopefully, my band Tire Fire, which is like this little party. It's like electric banjo, plugged in fiddle, electric bass, and drums.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man.
And you're already chipping away at that one?
Yeah, we play around Nashville. I've had it going for about 3 years, and we have played not a whole lot of shows in that time because it's just a pet project for me. But we do some stuff in town, and it's just so fun for me to do the electric thing, That's the direction that I'm leaning in.
Yeah, that's very cool. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Well, I've taken up plenty of your time. I really appreciate you getting together with me down here.
Yeah, thanks,
Looking
Keith.
forward to the show.
Happy
and everything.
to do it, man.
All right. Cheers, buddy.
Likewise, man.
And that's going to wrap up this episode of the Picky Fingers podcast with special guest Kyle Tuttle. Thanks again to Mike Jackson, the sponsor of today's episode. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, go to patreon.com/banjopodcast. You can always contact me, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Once again, I hope everyone has a great holiday season. This will be the last episode for 2018, so hope you all also have a happy new year, and I will see you in 2019 for a lot more episodes. Take care.